I almost didn't go to that wedding. I'd been invited as a +1 to someone who canceled 3 days before. I had the venue, the date, a rented suit, and no reason to go. Every logical part of me said, don't go. Stay home, order food, watch something. But something, and I still can't explain this, made me put on that suit. And that decision, that one small, illogical decision, is the reason I'm telling you this story tonight. Because sometimes the universe doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a sign or a dream or a moment of clarity. Sometimes it just puts a woman in a blue dress at the far end of a reception hall, crying alone into a glass of champagne she isn't drinking, and it waits to see what you'll do. The wedding was beautiful. Of course it was. String lights across a vaulted ceiling, white roses on every table, a band playing something slow and elegant that made even strangers want to lean toward each other. I knew maybe 4 people in that room. 3 of them were on the dance floor, and one of them was the groom, who had shaken my hand at the door and immediately disappeared into a cloud of relatives. So I did what every solo guest at a wedding does. I found a glass of something cold, I found a chair that looked friendly, and I tried very hard to look like a person who was choosing to sit alone, rather than a person who had to. That's when I saw her. She was at the far end of the hall, round table near the window, the one slightly removed from the rest, the one that somehow ends up at every event, the table that says you were added to the list late. She was in a blue dress, deep blue, like the sky right before it decides to become night. Her hair was up, though pieces of it had come loose in a way that looked less like an accident and more like the evening had been longer than she'd planned. She was alone, and she was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, the quiet kind, the kind that people who have been crying a long time do, when the sharp part is over and what's left is just weight. She was staring at the dance floor, at the bride and groom moving slowly through their first song. And her expression was the most complicated thing I'd ever seen on a human face. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was grief for something I didn't yet understand. I looked away, looked back, looked at the dance floor, looked at my glass, and then I picked up my chair and I walked across that reception hall. And I sat down next to a stranger who was crying at a wedding. Later, she would tell me it was the bravest thing she'd ever seen anyone do. I told her it was less bravery and more the fact that I couldn't not. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat, put my glass on the table, looked at the dance floor alongside her, as if that was a perfectly normal thing to do. Sit next to a crying stranger and simply be there. After a long moment, she spoke first. She said, without looking at me, "You don't have to do that." "Do what?" I said. "Sit here because you feel bad for me." I considered this. "I sat here," I said, "because you looked like the most interesting person in the room, and I'm not great at dancing." A pause. Then, barely, the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile yet, the possibility of a smile. A door, slightly ajar. "I'm Daniel," I said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were dark and direct and still glassy from crying. And she looked at me the way people look at someone they're deciding whether to trust. "Nora," she said. Then she looked back at the dance floor. "I should leave," she said. But she didn't move. "You don't have to," I said. "It's a big room." Another silence. The band shifted into something softer. A few couples drifted off the floor. And then, "I was supposed to get married today," she said. She said it simply, flatly, like a fact about the weather. I didn't speak. "Not here," she added. "Different venue, different city, different life." A pause. "I called it off 4 months ago." "And someone invited you to a wedding?" I said slowly. "My cousin," she said. "She didn't know the date. I didn't tell her." I looked at her. This woman in a blue dress who had come to a wedding on the day she was supposed to have her own, who had sat at the furthest table and cried quietly and told no one. "Why did you come?" I asked. She thought about it for a moment, really thought, not the quick answer, the real one. "Because I didn't want the day to be just me," she said finally, "alone in my apartment, knowing what time it was. I thought being somewhere with people would help." "Did it?" "Not until about 2 minutes ago," she said, and this time she let the smile come. We talked for 3 hours. I don't say that to be romantic, though it was. I say it because I want you to understand that it wasn't one conversation. It was many conversations, folded inside each other, the way real ones are. She told me about him. His name was Marcus. 7 years together. Engagement at the end of a trip to Portugal, on a hillside at sunset. The kind of proposal that looks perfect in photographs, she said. And it was beautiful. And I said yes immediately, and I meant it. "What changed?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "Nothing dramatic," she said finally. "That's the part that's hardest to explain. There was no betrayal, no terrible moment, just a Tuesday morning, 9 months before the wedding, when I woke up and thought, I am not happy. And then I waited. I waited for months to see if it would pass, if it was just fear, if I was making a mistake." "Was it a mistake?" I asked, carefully. "Calling it off?" She shook her head. "No, waiting as long as I did, that was the mistake. Because I knew, Nora. 4 months before I finally said anything, I already knew." She said her own name. I noticed. I knew, Nora, like she was talking to herself as much as to me. The hardest part, she said, wasn't the conversation. It wasn't the venue calls or the dress or telling people. The hardest part was accepting that you can love someone completely and still know they're not your person. I sat with that for a moment, because it was the kind of sentence that deserved space around it. "Do you still love him?" I asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation, "but not the way he needed me to. And he deserved someone who loves him the right way." She looked at the dance floor again. The couple there now were older, 60s maybe, moving slowly, forehead to forehead, eyes closed, in a world entirely their own. "That," Nora said quietly, "that's what I want. Not the venue or the flowers or the photographs. Just someone who dances with me like the room doesn't exist." I looked at her. "You'll have that," I said. She turned to me. Something in her eyes shifted, something careful and guarded that had been there all evening, slowly moving aside. "You don't know that," she said. "No," I admitted, "but I don't think a person who knows exactly what she wants is someone who doesn't find it." A long silence. Then she said, so quietly I almost missed it, "What do you want, Daniel?" I looked at her, at this woman I had known for 2 hours and 40 minutes, at the way the string lights caught the blue of her dress, at the way she looked at me, honestly, openly, with nothing to protect. "Honestly?" I said. "Please," she said. "I think I'd like to keep talking to you," I said, "after tonight, for as long as you'd let me." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she reached forward and picked up her champagne glass, the one she'd been holding all evening without drinking, and she raised it slightly. "Then you should probably know," she said, "that I am very good at long conversations." I picked up my glass. "I'm counting on it," I said. We clinked glasses, and she finally took a sip. The band played their last song at midnight. The lights came up slowly, the way they do at the end of a night that was better than expected. People gathered coats and children and half-empty wine glasses. The bride and groom disappeared into a corridor of camera flashes. Nora and I were still at that corner table. I should go, she said, for the second time that night. This time, though, it sounded different, not like escape, like reluctance. We stood, walked through the emptying hall toward the doors. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, the way September nights are, sharp enough to notice, soft enough to stand in. We stopped on the front steps, the kind of stop that doesn't have a plan attached to it, the kind where two people are stalling without admitting it. "Thank you," she said, "for sitting down." "Thank you," I said, "for not making me feel stupid for doing it." She laughed, a real one, the kind that surprises the person doing it, that comes from somewhere unguarded. I decided then that I wanted to hear that laugh as many times as life would allow. She opened her bag and found a pen, reached for my hand and turned it palm up. Wrote something, 7 digits and a name she didn't need to write. I already knew it. "Call me," she said, "not because of tonight, because I want to see if the conversation is just as good in daylight." She walked down the steps, stopped once, turned back. "For what it's worth," she said, "today was supposed to be the worst day of my year." She looked at me. "I think it might end up being one of the best." And she turned and walked into the September night. I looked down at my palm, her name, her number, written in ink that was already slightly smudged from where I'd been holding my hand too tightly, nervous without realizing it, the entire walk to the door. I called her the next morning. She answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. And the conversation, the one that started in a corner of a wedding reception on the hardest day of her year, that conversation has never really stopped. Some people spend their whole lives looking for the right moment, the right place, the right words, the right sign. But sometimes love doesn't wait for the right moment. Sometimes it's